Welcome, everyone, to our brand new podcast called Getting Deep with.
I'm Nicki. I am a PhD. I am a professor at an urban university, and I teach research and human behavior.
And I am Kimmie, the JD of this duo. I currently work with a continuing education provider for attorneys, and I also have my own estate planning practice.
You may be asking, what is this podcast about? This podcast is a spirited and analytical discussion about relevant news topics that are not a part of your daily timeline. Not only will you learn something new, you will be inspired to action. Hey, Kimmie.
So this time, I've got a question for you.
Uh-oh,
right. So the question that's been burning is, how has the concept of work-life balance shifted?
Ooh, that is an excellent question, Kimmie, and something that I've actually been thinking about. So you and I are both in Generation X.
Yep.
Which, the best generation.
The best.
We were the first latchkey kids. We were the kids that, like when we talk about divorce, parents were starting to divorce. We were the kids, the first kids with.
When the internet started.
The internet started, yes, computers. Okay, so we have our own characteristics that are wrapped into the experiences that we had. And when I think about the folks who are now coming into the workforce, so let's just pick like a generation for this. Let's think about Generation Z. So these are the folks who are coming in. I think they're about 23, 24, 25-ish. They're beginning their work career. And so how have things shifted? So and before I answer this, I also have to say that I'm talking about generalities for groups, because I don't want anyone to say, but Nicki, you said all Generation Zs or all Generation Xs. No, what I'm saying is we're talking generalities, and that doesn't mean that every single Generation Z person is going to have this characteristic, or every single Generation X person having this characteristic. But we're really speaking about generalities. So when I think about how Generation Xers, the best generation, how we entered the workforce, we entered the workforce with an understanding that work was very important, and that we still had a commitment to, you work hard, you get your education, you go into the job, you want a job with good benefits, you want a job that is going to be stable. So stability was very, very important. I heard about starting my own business, and I heard about those things, but it was really about, okay, get yourself established in your career first, and then you can worry about starting your own company or your own business. So it was very much about us being stable. I mean, that was an important thing for Generation Xers in the workforce. And we also had an understanding of hierarchy, understanding about your boss's boss. And even I worked for nonprofits, and I still was very clear about like the hierarchy and the board of directors. However, as research has shown us, Generation Z is a little bit different.
Yeah.
We see a lot of Generation Zers. They're coming into the workforce with very different expectations. First of all, unlike their Generation X counterparts or peers, they really want work-life balance. And so in order to get that balance, they're really willing to stop and say, okay, how can I have something of my own? And they're willing to do this without having, quote, that established job. So we see folks getting into what we call the hustle community, like folks will dub it the hustle community. And there's some other other terms for it where the community is the gig community. I've heard that too,
Yeah.
where we see people who are doing, they want to write screenplays, or they want to start a specific type of business, or they want to be a gamer and get paid for playing games. They're willing to drive Uber, and they're willing to cobble
Carrying
together,
out. Mm-hmm.
yes, a bunch of jobs to do these, in order to be able to do these things. It's just a very different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They're also willing to accept many different types of families structures.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, they don't find it odd that someone has two moms, and they don't find it odd that they may know people in polyamorous relationships, or they may know people who are trans, or in the trans community. So they don't find those things odd, because these are things that they've grown up understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas folks in Generation X, um, like, we happen to be supportive, and some of us are really trying to learn the language and trying to learn new pronouns and trying to learn different things within. And these things are important because within the work environment, the Generation Zs are going to expect different generations to
Mm-hmm.
understand about pronouns and to
Yeah.
use their pronouns,
Yeah.
and to use terms like partner or birthing parent versus other terms that Generation Xers may have grown up with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Generation Z. I think when we thought about this topic, it was in the context of our conversation about our own work-life balance and our own entrepreneurial endeavors. And so specifically, when you look at different characterizations of the different generations, when you look at Generation X, the characterization of us is that we're skeptical, but we're independent. That kind of goes to the latchkey kids, thing. Parents first,
Yes.
parents getting divorced. We're skeptical of hierarchy, but we are not challenging it. We
Exactly.
won't challenge it.
Exactly.
And we value work-life balance and flexibility, but at the same time, we're still workaholics because our parents, you know, um, sort of pounded into our brains, get a good job with good benefits, right?
Right.
That was
Right.
the thing. You got to get a good job with good benefits
And
for
Kimmy,
that
I
stability.
would even take that a step further. Get a good career.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
kept hearing
Absolutely.
that. I kept hearing job, but then it shifted to career. So,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And and then with the Generation Z, they are really focused on um creating their own normal.
Right.
They don't
Right.
they don't necessarily want to fit into what someone tells them is normal. They're going to create their normal and live in it, right? And
Exactly.
then the other
Exactly.
side of that is, they have this they place a high value on work-life balance, but then they want the immediate gratification of doing that.
Yes.
Or they want to make a lot. It's like they want the work-life balance, but they also want to make a lot of money, which isn't always going to happen. So we talk about it in the context of, okay, so we feel like we can learn something from each generation gives something different, right?
Absolutely.
We're the stability generation. Like, we really focus on stability. And oh wait, and this is the other thing, the whole hierarchy. you know Generation Zers, they feel like they can come into a situation and be at the top,
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of sort of start at the bottom and you're here. Like, they don't really feel like that. They don't really feel like
Right.
that they should have to start from the bottom. They want to start from the top.
Yeah,
That work life balance.
and also I've found that, like, in the research that I've looked at, Generation Zers don't necessarily see the difference between, like, the top and the bottom. Like, they
Hmm.
don't, if they're coming into an organization, they're not going to say, okay, I can't talk to a certain person because they're at the top.
Right.
It's the communication is more normalized, Whereas for us, I mean, we were explicitly told in a lot of situations, if you have a problem, you better go to your direct manager,
Yeah,
and
your
have a
immediate
conversation. Your
supervisor.
immediate supervisor. Don't go anyplace else,
Yeah.
Don't go
They're,
anyplace
they're,
else.
Generation Z, they're definitely think outside of the boxers. And we've talked about how it's almost like, oh, that's kind of what we wanted to be, but we just didn't do
Yeah.
it.
We were so busy working hard, we didn't have time to do it.
We
And
didn't.
and you know what? There's also one other thing I have to mention this. We also had stranger danger. We were like the first generation of stranger danger. So we're skeptical. We have this,
Yeah.
there's this little bit of this distrust,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
cover your back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
they're
I
very
remember.
open. And Generation Z,
Yes.
they're very open, and yeah, I just feel like they just really want to make their own way. And I feel like they can learn a little bit of stability from us,
Hmm.
and we can learn a little bit of thinking outside of the box from them.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that whole saying, if there isn't a seat at the table, make your own
Make
table
your
and
own
bring your
table.
own
Right.
seat.
Yeah.
They, that generation, I feel like ushered that in. Uh,
Yes.
I think a lot
Yes.
of millennials, are they the forgotten generation? Is that what they call them? Is that another word for millennials?
Are you thinking about the silent generation, the older
No,
adults? No.
maybe I am. Maybe I am, because they are called the silent generation. But
But millennials, from what I understand, they are a much smaller generation.
mhm.
And they're also the generation that was
No. Actually, no. Millennials are the largest. Actually, let
are
me
they the
go.
largest?
Yeah, let me go back to this article. Yep. So, well, I mean, I don't know where this article got its information. It's an article. It's an article that I found on LinkedIn, and yeah, it says that millennials make up the largest generation in the work. Well, I guess I should say in the
In the
workforce.
workforce. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes
and they're
sense.
starting to move up into leadership positions. While
Okay,
Generation
that makes sense.
Xers,
Because
yeah,
some Generation Zers are high school and they're
hmm
still coming into
yeah,
workforce.
yeah,
They have Okay, so that makes sense.
absolutely.
That makes sense.
So yeah, so they're yeah. So yeah, I forgot where I was going with that.
But that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay.
What's your tell me something good about the differences, this new idea of work-life balance and how it's shifted?
I think the tell me something good is just being able to communicate and to learn from the different generations. And you mentioned it
Mhm.
previously in this episode about picking up some of the good traits from the different generations.
Mhm.
Like, for example, one of the things that I've been able to do is I have a person from Generation Z who works very closely with me.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that they visit, they're going out and they're visiting and they're doing a lot of things, and just really thinking about that work-life balance. Like, they don't seem to have the level of stress that I did. Like, when I was right out of college and I was in
Right.
the workforce, my whole thing was, I've got to get established. I've got to make my footprint. I've got to do this.
Right.
But they seem very just normal and
Mhm.
very high emotional intelligence and
Mhm.
very just enjoying life. And so I think that is something that, as a Gen Xer, I can learn from them, and they can also learn a little bit about the stability and some of the other
Yes.
independent characteristics that we have.
There
Yeah.
needs to be
Yeah.
that balance.
Absolutely.
You can't be totally one way on
One
this end
way.
or
Yeah.
the other end.
Yeah.
There has to be that balance. And so I like the idea that there are so many of us still in the work world together, because we can learn from each other, and
Mhm.
therefore balance out some of our different characteristics. And isn't this indicative of, when you mention high emotional intelligence, and And so does that mean as a society we're moving up my Maslow's hierarchy of needs now? Like, are we self-actualizing?
I don't know if I would say that.
You don't think we're
Just
self-actualizing?
after our pandemic, we have lots of folks who are very emotionally not well because of the pandemic, and so I think
Well, that was an anomaly, though, right? That kind of threw a monkey
yeah, that
in it.
was an anomaly.
But
But one thing I will say is that um, I definitely feel like Generation Z has brought a has made therapy and being emotionally well at
yeah,
Generation Z has really made that has really
it's
normalized that.
normalizing. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why I say that. So let me pull up Maslow's hierarchy, because I don't remember each level, right? So
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
oops, Maslow's hierarchy. Okay, so we've got at the bottom, we've got physiological needs.
Like our
Then we've
food
got
and shelter
and
and
then
clothing.
we've
Yep.
got safety needs, your
Mm-hmm.
personal security,
Security.
employment,
Yes.
resources, health,
Help.
right?
Yep.
Love and belonging. Because I feel like our generation, really, really honed in on that level, the safety need,
Yes.
right?
Safety. The safety. The food, clothing, shelter. The bottom, and then the safety. Yes. Yes.
Employment, resources, health, property.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we mastered that level with our generation. And we started to usher in love and belonging, right? So
Right.
we've got
Right.
friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we started to usher that in, or the millennials. I feel like the millennials really ushered the love and belonging really in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
That
started
sense of
thinking about that.
connection. Mm-hmm.
And now the Gen Zs, they really, I mean,
Freedom,
if you,
because you've got that. So that 1, 2, 3. The fourth level up is the esteem level of
uh-huh.
respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. Like, I feel like Generation Z is working on that fourth level.
They definitely have normalized that piece, like
Yeah.
as we talk about the different levels. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that does seem like it's a level that they would say, okay, it's very important to get to this level.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for us, because, and you know what, Kimmy, we didn't even talk about this. Like, we didn't even talk about the differences that race and gender, like those pieces, like being a Black woman,
Yeah.
growing up being Generation X,
Mm-hmm.
and then looking at other Black women now who are
Mm-hmm.
growing up being Generation X, or sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Z,
Z.
and
Mm-hmm.
how different those experiences are,
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so certainly with when you think about communities, I mean, because you can add that nuance in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of course we're talking in generalities, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
when you add that nuance in, which certainly, as two professional Black women, we have to talk about it. But yeah, when you add that nuance in, yeah, I mean the ladder up that hierarchy is a little bit slower. It could be a little bit off. It can detour. You can do all those
Mm-hmm.
things. And yeah, and so I feel like Generation Z definitely, the Black women in Generation Z I think they are ushering that level in, really, to be
Yeah,
honest.
and I think I've seen a lot when I think, and remember, just talking generalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I think about people being their authentic self or their authentic selves, I see that in Generation X, I mean, if we stepped up to be our authentic self, chances are we were seen as being other, or outcast. But when I think about Generation Z, the folks who are entering the workforce now, it's almost like if you are too, quote, normal or too structured, then that is the outcast right there. I mean, it seems like people are really okay with expressing themselves, being different.
That's a point, though. So that does sort of lend itself to when I first said, okay, are we making it up to the top of that hierarchy? And so now I kind of agree with you that we're not, in the sense that we're kind of stuck, because we have this generation who is ushering in this different level of freedom, but at the same time, they, some of them, not all, like we said, generality, they look down on those of us who are still stable, and maybe that really is who we are, right?
Yeah.
And so, so as a society, is, experiencing that self-actualization. No, maybe we're not there, because there's still this sort of like, okay, well, being different is now the norm. And if you're normal, something's wrong with you. When that really shouldn't be the case. And so that really should be, where we are learning from each other. And so that can lend itself to the call to action. Because really the call to action is pretty much the same thing. It's this idea of continuing to learn from each other and respect each other for who they are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to be open to, just because I am at this point in my career and I'm seeing some different ways of being and ways of knowing, for me to be open to that, because there are times when I know that folks will say, oh, well, Generation Z, they're lazy, or they're this or that. Yeah. But for us to really think about, like, what does lazy really mean? What are we saying? Are we saying that people aren't willing to be workaholics and therefore they're lazy? So just being open to learning from folks. And I would hope that they would be open to learning from Generation Xers, because we've been through a whole lot, in terms of, we've had a lot of different changes that occurred within our growing up. One thing that I can also mention is HIV. Remember when we were younger, HIV was a death sentence. And so now Generation Z, those folks are growing up, and it's not identified the way it was with our, it's not identified. Like when we were growing up, entering the workforce, if someone ended up with HIV, they really didn't think they had a work career, because they were going to die, and they were ostracized. But now people with HIV, they come in and they work. It's a chronic condition. It's not a death sentence disease like it was previously. So that's another change. There's so many changes. Many changes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I think with that, we can wrap it up.
Yes.
And leave with the note of each one teach one.
Absolutely. Each one teach one.
And as normal, if you enjoyed this content, like and subscribe, and we'll continue giving you this fabulous content that is not a part of your daily timeline.
Absolutely. So make sure that you leave comments. Let us know what you like. We really, really love it when you let us know what you like, and we definitely want to know. So have a fabulous, fabulous day.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.